Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healers specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
Exceptionally well. I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for asking, Rory. Both Rory and I are grateful that you have joined us for the Counselling Tutor Podcast. You've got us at episode 273. 3 stops on today's journey, starting off with our student services, where we acknowledge the journey of a student becoming a counsellor. And today we're speaking about planning your research project. We then go into ethical, sustainable practice, which is kind of looking at starting, running, building, growing a practice. And today we're going to be speaking about developing a supportive network around you of professionals. And then we go into the CPD part of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, which is Practice Matters, where we bring in a guest. And today, Rory, you reached out, you spoke to Bay Whitaker, and an interesting topic. It is kink in the therapy room. So you're going to want to stick around for that. Believe me, it is worth your while. And of course, a disclaimer as we start this episode, the kink in the therapy room is of an adult nature. So watch out for those little ears that may be listening along with you as you listen to your podcast today. So starting us off, Rory, student services, planning your research project.
Yes, absolutely. And I think within all training, certainly at practice level, there's an expectation that there will be some kind of small-scale research project. And you'll be asked to research something and maybe present it in front of your peers. And this sets you up nicely, really, for, the world of work. There have been times when I've researched things and presented it in front of my peers. I guess I'm doing that now with the podcast. And we do Ken and myself do it every week. And it's becoming more and more part of our profession, research, making sure that we research and understand what kind of treatments or therapy that we're offering our clients and making sure it's evidenceable. And that has become a growing edge of therapy practice in recent years. So when you're asked to do a small research project, I think it's useful to have what's called a SMART action plan. And a SMART is an acronym for specific. What do you want to accomplish? Set specific goals of what you'd like to find out and try and think about what results you want. Measurable, how are you going to measurable? Achievable, what you're going to do in terms of achieving your goal. Is it relevant to counselling? Make sure it's relevant to counselling. And also timely. And I think this is the really important piece because you'll be asked to do undertake research and present it in a specific time. So I think when you look at the timely, is it achievable? And I think once you've got that part of the research or that part of the thinking in play, then the research part, what you're going to research and how you're going to do it and what methodologies you're going to use, then fall in behind that. But I think setting a SMART target is really important just to make sure that what you're doing is relevant and timely and you have specific outcomes, a hypothesis, something you'd like to prove or disprove the best you can. Once you've done that, you can move on to thinking about the methodology, Ken.
Yes, and of course, when you're looking at the methodology, it would be the methodology that you apply to your research. And of course, there is primary research and secondary research. We've got qualitative research, quantitative research. So you should be briefed within your training on the different research modalities and what you are required to kind of deliver, depending on the level that you are at. And we recognize that it may be that you're doing the research project alone, that it is your research project. You may be doing your master's, and then that's going to maybe some work that you're going to be undertaking by yourself. But of course, maybe at higher education, lower levels than masters, you may be working with a group. And I think the importance of the group dynamics, the peers that you have around you, are so important in who you choose to meet up with and group with, so that there is an even sharing of the tasks for that project, so that there's not just one person carrying it along. And from our years of teaching together, Rory and I kind of recognized what are the things that make a successful group of students that are coming together to do their research together. And some of the things that we recognized was it's about cooperating and listening to one another. That's a really important part there. So it's almost like empathic listening to one another within that research project. So we're demonstrating that. Not afraid to ask for help. And we can ask for help within our group from one another if we're struggling with what we have taken on or our SMART goals, as Rory has just kind of outlined what that is. We may be falling behind on our timeline. We might go to the rest of our group and ask for some help or how we may do that. And of course, beyond that, the group may choose to go and ask the tutor if they're struggling with a specific element or aspect of the research project. And we've recognized that not being afraid to stand up and go, you know what, I need a little bit of help here, is a great strength when doing your research project. Meeting and reviewing what has been done and doing this on a regular, formal basis. So when you bring your group together, you decide together on the topic you're going to be researching, you kind of allocate the tasks of who's going to be doing what. What you don't want to be doing is then on the day of the research presentation, realizing that something is missing or something is not as you thought it might be. So getting together on a regular basis and reviewing what has been done and documenting that, having a checklist, having a tick it off. Has this been done? Has that been done? That is really, really important. And then I'm going to put one last one in that Rory and I, have recognized as great strengths in when working within a group, putting your research project together, and it is to play to your strengths and the individual strengths of the members within the group. Now, so often strengths might be hidden. So it's a really good idea when you start the project to kind of check what strengths people have or what skills people have to be able to bring in. You may be surprised. Somebody might say, oh, I love graphic design, laying things out. And maybe they would then be in charge of the slides and putting that together because it's something that they enjoy. Somebody may say, I've got some project management experience. Oh, thank you. You can oversee the project and kind of make sure that we're on task. So stopping, taking a breath, not just looking at the research project, but the people you're working with, choosing or looking what their strengths are, and then allocating those tasks or those SMART goals that Rory laid out according to those tasks can make all the difference, Rory.
It can. And I mean, thank you for outlining that, because I think if it's a group project, it's really important that the group works in a cohesive way and works together. And, I've seen research delivered by people who are, shall we say, slightly not on the same page or a bit disconnected. And all I'll say, it was interesting to say the least, trying to work out who was doing what. But I also think that once that's in place, the piece that Ken has beautifully outlined, the other part is what methodology you're going to use. And methodology means method. How are you going to do your research? Now, the first thing is something called secondary research. And secondary research is find out what other people have found out. You can do that by going into books. You can search the internet. So say looking at a good one, and I'm not suggesting people do this, would be Kubler-Ross's theory of end-of-life development, the DABDA model, and denial, anger, acceptance. I can't remember the thing it's in now, the running order it's in, but the work of Kubler-Ross and the end-of-life phases that people go through. And you may want to do some research about what people have come up with already, so that you've got a really interesting touchstone for your research. When you come to the end of it, you can say, actually, our research is the same conclusion that such and such a body's research has come up with, or it's slightly different than such and such a body's research. And then you look at the methodology. Now, in terms of how we undertake research, usually in small scale research, you're looking at qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative is the numbers, and qualitative is the experience. And they're both very, very important in research. The numbers gives us effectiveness. 20 people went through this therapy and 15 people thought it was effective, 5 people thought it wasn't effective, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't really give us the full picture. Qualitative research, things like interviews, case studies, give a narrative of what's been experienced within the theory. So you might ask people, what's been your experience of loss? And it might be that they have very different experiences to the theory that is being put forward. And I think it's a mixture of that. Now, the advantages and disadvantages of qualitative and quantitative research are that quantitative research, the numbers can be done by asking people in a poll. You can poll people. You can do a questionnaire with a tick box. So it's very efficient and very quick to do. Qualitative research means taking the time to interview people, maybe recording the interview, then making a transcript, then looking at the transcripts and see if there's any commonalities. So you have to really pick your research topic very carefully in the methods that you apply to it. And of course, there's one final ingredient that we need to be very thoughtful of: ethics in research. So I think any good tutor will ask you to do a research proposal. They will ask you to submit what you're thinking of researching and how you're going to do it. And they will look at it and they'll go, yes, that's fine, that's ethical, that'll work. Many years ago, when I was teaching, I got a phone call from my colleagues who were teaching criminology. And they said, I just want to run this one past you, Rory. We're going to send a resource to prisoners in a prison, trying to work out if they've got personality disorders. And it's basically a tick box that they've got to fill in. And at the end of it, we'll be able to measure it and see how many prisoners have got personality disorders. And I said, you can't do that. You cannot do that. You need permission from the people who are doing that. I said, you're going to be sticking labels on people. What happens if you find someone else got a personality disorder? You can't do that. And I think it was a case of someone had a really good idea, probably generated by a student, really didn't think it through. And of course, it wouldn't have got past the prison authorities. The prison authorities wouldn't have allowed you to poll or to research personality disorders in the criminal justice system without it being, I would imagine, at PhD level, with a lot of regulation put in there. So I think it's about being realistic about what you're thinking of researching, Ken.
Yeah, definitely. You're going to have some, in the real world, you're going to have some form of an ethics committee that research will go to before it is approved and before you can get funding and begin that research. When we're kind of doing it as a project for maybe an assignment, there should be something in place to kind of check the ethics of the topic that is chosen, how data will be collected. There's laws around that. GDPR, if you're taking people's data or asking them to fill in forms, are they giving any of their personal details? How's that being recorded? Where's that being stored? How long is it being stored for? Who has access? So there's a lot to think about there, but your tutor should help guide you through that. And we do have from time to time students posting maybe their questionnaire or their form. As Rory mentioned, you might have a quantitative form where you're asking other counselling students to kind of weigh in to see where they're at a certain topic for your research. And we will only allow research that has been ethically overseen on Counselling Tutor. So you can't just kind of post your research project on Counselling Tutor. Our administration team will take that down until it has been looked at and we are sure that it's been has some kind of ethical overview before you can put that on. But if you have got an ethical overview on yours, you can certainly post it on Counselling Tutor and get other people kind of weighing in on that and saying how it is for you. And you kind of ended your sentence, Rory, in saying it kind of leads you into thinking what kind of topic you might look into when you consider the ethics. And there's more to consider when you're looking at your topic. Rory, you spoke about that secondary research, and that secondary research is important, that somebody else has at least looked into this. Are you able to find papers on this topic? If you go into Google Scholar and look for published papers, do you find them on this topic? Because if it is there, it's going to make your life a lot easier. So, for example, if we were to say, what is the effect of people's mental health since the introduction of AI, and at the time of recording this podcast, we're kind of only a few months in really to the launch of AI, it would be really difficult for you to find information about it. It's too new, and I guess it would be too much of an ask. You want to find something that has information that you can easily find to lighten the load for yourself. Remember, we're referencing and referring to others' works, and that's kind of how academia works, isn't it? It's all linked in some way, that one research paper would link to where the information was gathered and other research papers that kind of correspond to that. And Rory's made a super duper handout for you on this that you'll be able to grab, download, have it in front of you when you do your research project. Wherever you are in your study journey, if you haven't done a research project yet and you want to become a counsellor, you're going to face a research project. It's coming, so it's worth having this handout. Yeah. Where do you get it? Go to counsellingtutor.com, podcast tab, right at the top in the menu bar, find episode 273. You can download it. It is free of charge, and that is Rory's super duper handout, research and presentation guide for you. Anything else on research, Rory, before we check out of student
absolutely,
service?
Ken. And I think it's very possible that students may be asked to do some primary research. Primary research is just what you're finding out. You know, you may just interview a few people and get the themes from that. You may do some type of quantitative research where you post on Facebook and ask a question and do a poll and poll that way. And just as a reminder, if you're not a member of our Facebook group, type Facebook group into type Counselling Tutor into Facebook, and don't type Facebook into Counselling Tutor. Don't do that. Type Counselling Tutor into Facebook. You'll see us, we're a closed group. We'll let you in. And if you are wanting to share if you are wanting to look for participants in research, then get hold of our admin, Charlie, and he will forward your request to our senior tutor, who will look over, should I say, your proposal and your ethical sign off. And once that's been approved, you can post it and get your participants. And of course, you know, when you come to the end of your research, it's not the end. The next question is, where now? What next?
Yeah, there's always another question, isn't there? We'll leave it at that question as we kind of reverse out of student services today. Student services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Have you ever wondered if you're using counselling skills effectively? Confidentiality means we rarely see skills used by others, so it's no wonder that so many students say they lack confidence in their counselling skills. That's why I built Counselling Skills Academy. Counselling Skills Academy is an online course that you can do at your own pace. It will give you the skills competence and confidence to know that you're using your skills most effectively. You will see real counselling skills used by a counsellor in real life sessions, covering everything from how risk is assessed right through to working towards an appropriate ending. Visit counselingskillsacademy.com to learn more and to claim your counselling tutor discount. That's counselingskillsacademy.com. And now moving on to that ethical, sustainable practice, recognizing that starting, building, sustaining a practice takes work. It takes us to maybe have skills that sit outside of what we may have learnt in counselling studies. And today's topic, we are speaking about developing a supportive professional network to support you in your practice, Rory.
Yes, and we've actually already touched on this in episode 247. We talked about building a referral pathway, and I think I said in that podcast that counselling is a very solitary occupation. You know, we work in a room with a client. We see our supervisor in a room on their own, and if we're working online, we may very well just be working on our own in our own homes. So it's really important that we build some kind of professional network. I'm very fortunate doing the work I do. I have a network of people that I can phone up or drop an email to and say, do you fancy a virtual coffee, or do you fancy meeting up if they're local? And just chat about what's going on in practice, how the world of therapy is changing, anything you might be struggling with. A peer support is really useful, and having a lot of, I think, diverse voices within that peer support network is really, really useful. It's very it can be very rich, very empowering, and also it can be very supportive, because this is a very, very isolated profession. We can go to conferences and we can go online, but actually make it a point of just having a network of, as we would say in the north of England, a network of mates that you can just hook up with and just have a chat and talk about how their practices are going and different modalities, different approaches, or just have a chat about something else, just to keep in contact with people, because human contact is so important. And I think that can sometimes be lost for the individual practitioner.
Definitely. Surrounding yourself with the right people. And the right people don't always give us the answers that we want to hear. So often, the right people, if they really are right, they will be critical friends. They will give us another perspective, another frame of reference on something that we may be looking at or maybe discussing or maybe asking. It's interesting. I'm just referring back to our last section, Rory, where we were speaking at student services about planning your research, and you mentioned a peer review, yours, approaching you and asking your opinion on a criminology research paper they wished to do, and you acted as a critical friend. You brought your experience and you shared that with them, and I guess at the end of that they chose not to do that research project because they had some feedback that made sense. So basically having that critical friend or another way in can help us in our decision making. And if you look at it's worth mapping out what your support network looks like. Who are they? And you might start with your supervisor, because they're there to support you. Yes, you pay them a fee, but they're part of your support network. Who else is in your support network? Have you got peers, friends that you maybe met on CPD sessions that you can connect with and chat with, ask advice, guidance, check in with how it's going with yourself in your practice? And I'm not talking about sharing client presentations here. I'm talking about just sharing the day-to-days of running a practice, because at the heart of that practice is us. And it's really lonely. I know, Rory, when I speak with my family about counselling relating topics, something I might be excited about, something I might have just done some CPD about, they look back with kind of a little blank look on their face and a little tiny smile, nodding their heads, going, yeah, because they don't get it. And of course they don't get it. They can't get it. We've spoken so often how lonely it can be in counselling studies, where students start sharing excitedly what they're learning and what they're going through, and they find themselves pretty alone because the rest of the family, their partner, friends at work, colleagues at work, don't get it. So even if it's just someone you can share some information with, your excitement about the new thing you're going to implement in your practice, or something you just learned in CPD, or maybe a chewing the fat about what do you think is going to happen when such a thing rolls out. It might be a change in an ethical framework. Who is your support network so that you don't do this alone? You're not in isolation, in constant service of the clients without having a place for you to decompress.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm glad you're not the only one who gets the. Oh, very, very nice. You've been learning about cognitive dissonance, have you? Lovely. Would you join with a cup of tea, Rory? Well, yes. All right then. And it's just nice to be able to share your knowledge, share your training, just hang out with like-minded people. There wasn't a group in Saddleworth, which is the next village to me, who used to have a regular kind of round table coffee morning where they would talk and share information. They used to invite me in, but it was at a time, unfortunately, where I couldn't make it. But I thought that was a brilliant initiative, just for people to, if they've got time, to pop in, get themselves a coffee, and they even used to have topics. They used to have a topic that they wanted to discuss. So it's really important. And you can make some great pals as well. I made some great pals. My mates, I call them, phone them up and say, "What do you think about this?" And they go, "Oh yeah, I know what you mean." Or no, or "Oh, we don't want to be doing that." And there have been times where I've had to put the friendly arm around the shoulder, metaphorically, of course, Ken, and say, "You sure that's the right direction you want to be going in?" Oh yeah, you got a point. And there has been times where people have put their metaphorical arm around my shoulder and said, you might want to look into this or think about that, Rory. I think it's just essential, and it's essential because your own well-being is important, and most important, it extends longevity in the work. If you work without any support, you're going to be a bright star that burns a very short time. To sustain your practice over the years, you're going to have some support network. It's just essential, in my view. Indeed.
And I guess that in this day and age, we have technology that can aid us in that support network. You were mentioning about the round table coffee days, Rory, that are pretty close to you. And I guess that was before the days of technology such as Zoom, where now you can meet up with peers from anywhere in the country, indeed anywhere in the world, and have a chat. Yes. And there's great strength in something called a mastermind. And a mastermind is basically a group of people getting together for a very specific reason. And you can create your own little mastermind and meet once a month with 3-4 other peers, get together and just chew the fat, speak over how it's been, what you're going through, any challenges or questions that you may have. And it can be heard by the group, and people can share their experiences from their own journey back, and it can be a very, very supportive place just using the new technology that is available. So it's an interesting topic. What else is there in that supportive professional network, Rory? One thing I thought of is if you're planning on doing CPD, specifically when it's niche-based, and when I say niche-based, it's kind of when you're going to be adding a new section to your practice. So if you decided to work with children and young people, that is a very specific niche that you would be choosing to train in and then to kind of serve in, and you might balance that with the rest of the practice that you do, or you may choose to train in couples counselling. There are niche trainings to kind of give you another arrow in your quiver, as it were. And I would always recommend, if you're thinking about doing any kind of training like that, maybe you want to now train as a clinical supervisor, find a peer that has done that training. Find a peer that is working within that niche and ask them how they find it. And check it out, get some guidance, advice from somebody who is already there. Because very often we can look at something and we have no reference of it in reality. We'll project onto that our thoughts and our feelings of what that may be. But if you kind of go through the training that is required, you've got the cost of that, and then get to actual practice and you find that it's not something that suits you, or it's not what you thought it would be, that's a waste of your resources and your time and, of course, your money. Getting together with a peer that is working there, having a really good chat about it and saying to them, what are the things I should consider when going into this? Are there any things you wish you'd known before going into this? It can really inform who you are and the decisions that you make. And it usually costs nothing to surround yourself with peers. People are happy to meet up and talk about counselling. And as an example, to see that in action, think of a live CPD event that you've been to recently. Think about the tea time or the coffee break, and how you'll find yourself chatting to people you've never met before and finding commonality pretty quickly. We like to talk to one another.
It's true. It's true, and I like I think I like the reference to mentorship. If I was going back into child therapy, I know exactly the person whose phone I'd be ringing.
Yeah.
Because I've got a friend who is a specialist child therapist. She is very, very, very competent and well educated and incredibly well has incredible knowledge. And just sitting with her, the information just flows out. And also, it's just nice to sit with a mate and have a cup of coffee and a bun. So it's I like a nice bun. Cup of tea and a bun.
I'm glad you corrected that, Rory. There would have been so many complaints to the mailbag, you saying you had a cup of coffee. We know that's not true. You're always drinking tea. Come on.
Well, it's true. I do occasionally have a cup. I do occasionally have a cup of coffee. But I know.
I'm shocked.
Who knew? But my preferred beverage is the Earl Grey.
Of course.
The Earl Grey tea. Just to clear that up. And it's just nice to just to hang around. So I guess my challenge to you is, if you are a single practitioner and you're feeling the heat a bit, why not start to reach out? Why not think about who you want to meet up with, and make it part of your practice, make it part of your routine. You'll find it will pay dividends, and your practice will flourish when you're with like-minded people, critical friends, and you're able to get out of that bubble sometimes of just you and the client.
And if you're wondering, how do you go about this? How do you start this? Maybe it's a topic you take to your supervisor and discuss there and say, how could I do this? What could I do? If I'm thinking, Rory, if we work with a client and we come to an ending within a session, we would explore their support networks before they go out into the world. Well, what about our support networks? What does yours look like listening to this? Who is your support network? Map it as you would for a client and look who it is for you. Maybe listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast is part of your support network. It's like brings back sanity, listening to other people also talking about counselling. Who knows? But I guess the task here is go ahead, map that out, and if you need to, take it into your supervisor and make it a topic of discussion at your next supervision. That is ethical, sustainable practice, looking after and supporting professional networks for your good self. And as we now move into our CPD section, Rory, I'm excited. I'm rubbing my hands together. This is the practice matters section, and a very interesting topic, Rory: kink in the therapy room.
Yes, it was the philosopher Terence who said, and I'm paraphrasing in English here, that he said, "I am human, and nothing human is alien to me." And we're now finding that within our society in general, people are looking at their own personal experience in every aspect. And some people find themselves kinky. They like a little bit of kink in the bedroom, or maybe some organized kink. So I met up with Bay Whitaker, who is quite an expert on this and knows a lot about counselling kinky clients. As Ken said at the top of the podcast, this interview contains features and topics of an adult nature. But this is what Bay had to say.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com.
One of the euphemisms that we've often used on the podcast through the years is that clients can only go as far as the counsellor is willing to go themselves. So I'm delighted to be interviewing Bay Whitaker. She's the director of Sheffield Central Counselling, and we're going to be talking about kink. So first of all, Bay, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Rory. Thank you for asking me.
Now, I guess that when we're thinking of kink or kinky, I guess that for the mainstream, most people would have come across this in the novel or the book 50 Shades of Grey, which was about a sadomasochistic relationship. But that probably only covers one part of kink. So I guess my first question is, what is kink? How is it defined?
Oh, good question. I mean, I think there isn't sort of just one definition. I think if we say sex that is not primarily about our sexual organs, is about different practices, might be different items, or might need to be sex that happens within a sort of theatre, a dynamic, even if that's just something that, we role play together at home in the comfort of our home, but it's surrounded by a sort of additional meaning. If I try and define kink anymore, I'll have loads of people getting on to me telling me I'm doing it wrong, so I better stop there.
Okay. Well, yeah. I had some friends, and he used to like dressing up as Robin Hood, and his wife liked just dressing up as Maid Marian. And in the confines of their own home, I think they had a lot of fun at that. They developed a narrative and a role playing game. But I think interestingly, within that, within the kink community, there is a saying about sane, safe, and consensual, isn't there? The fact that yes, and maybe I think that's a good starting point, to talk about people who maybe have a very exciting or esoteric sexual taste. Safe, sane, and consensual. What does that mean?
Well, this acronym I think became popular in the early 2000s. And I think it became popular to counter people's concerns and worries about one large subset of kink, which is BDSM.
Yes.
Bondage, discipline, domination, sadomasochism. And so, because crucial to BDSM kinks is there is a power dynamic,
yes,
a power imbalance. So somebody is pretending to be less powerful, somebody is pretending to be more powerful. Pretending, you can see here, is where the consensual part comes in. So, I think the gold standard for people who are into BDSM is getting to know your play partners, as we call it, and to do quite a lot of talking and negotiating about what both partners are okay with, what they consent to, and what they don't, and what limits there might be. So, and that these limits be safe and sane. Well, I'm not quite sure where the etymology of why sane is included in that definition. Actually, that has to some extent been superseded by another acronym, RAC, Risk Aware Consensual Kink, because it's not always completely safe. Same as lots of hobbies aren't safe, are they? Boxing, canoeing, rock climbing, they're not completely safe, but people want to do them.
Yes, I think that's very useful, and I hear within that there's a consensual element to this. I think sometimes it's easy to believe that the people who engage in kink are somehow maybe abusive or maybe forcing this on the partner. There's a consensual element to it. And usually, and I know we focused on the BDSM element of it, there's usually safe words or a time limit on the play, so that each partner would know really what was going on and be able to stop the one would be able to stop the proceedings if someone became distressed or needed just said, no, I don't want to do this anymore. Very important. Yes, that's a really good point. I think
it's generally, as I say, the gold standard is play always with a safe word, a safe signal. If you've got a gag, you have a hand signal or something, so that that will stop the play. Now, it might stop it for a brief renegotiation, or it might stop it completely.
Yes.
Yes,
and I think that although, and I keep going back to 50 Shades of Grey, because I think that particular book did actually bring kink into the mainstream to some extent, into everyday awareness, because it was such a popular book.
Yes.
I just wonder, do you think that clients may be worried about explaining their sexual preferences, their kinks to a therapist? Do you think there still is that sense maybe that this is something that's more secretive than maybe other aspects of a client's life?
Yes, I think so. I think it's an interesting question, because I'm a kink knowledgeable counsellor, and I have that on my website. So kinky clients come to me, because they know that I get it. I'm of that world myself. And so I think with a counsellor who isn't knowledgeable about kink, I think clients would be often quite a lot more careful and circumspect, and might well go through therapy without ever mentioning they're kinky. Because we've got plenty of other reasons to be depressed and anxious in this modern life, haven't we? So,
yes, indeed. And I think it's interesting. A few years ago, when I was a student, I had a student who had a client who was kinky. And it was quite a difficulty, because my student felt embarrassed, because these were things the client was explaining that she never explored herself. And I said, well, you need to do some CPD and do some exploration. And I pointed her to like Pink Therapy website, which is a huge website that holds a lot of information. There's a lot of authoritative websites out there that are not, I said to her at the time, whatever you do, don't put these terms in the college computer, or the IT departments will be knocking on my door. But there are authoritative websites that deal and explain in a non-salacious way. They're information websites, aren't they?
Yes, there are. I think therapy is an excellent resource. There's another one, which is American, which is called Ashra, spelled like it sounds, PASHRA.org, and that's extremely informative about many aspects of kink. And then there is a great resource, which is for kinky people to talk to each other as well, and that's just called FetLife.
Yes.
Life.com. Anybody can join that. And I think it's like Facebook for kinky people. So if you not in a voyeuristic way, but you can become a member of that and just, I'm just here to learn. And you can just see what kind of things people are talking about. I think that's a really great site and really informative.
Yeah, so we'll put those links into the show notes of the podcast, so people can have a look. One of the things that I know that you have an interest in is the origin story, why people develop their kind of tastes and appetites in kink. And is this something you think that clients may well want to explore in therapy? They may think, I wonder why, I have these particular tastes.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you put it like that, because I am interested in the origin story. I'm interested in it in order to debunk the idea that kinky people need an origin story. So I think it comes from a place of anxiety, a place of shame, a place of self-pathologizing. There is something wrong with me because, I want to wear leather and be tied up and whipped. So that leads to the desire for an explanation. So when I say origin story, I mean that almost like a cliche of like, oh, something traumatic happened to me when I was a kid, and so therefore I've turned out like this. So I'm really quite interested in challenging that assumption, because we don't all need an origin story, and chances are we're not going to remember it if people don't remember the early years that often inform our sexuality.
Yeah, I think
yes.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting, because I know I keep going back to this, but one of the criticisms of the book 50 Shades of Grey was the Grey character was effectively introduced to BDSM by someone older than him earlier on, and what a lot of people said was, this isn't actually accurate. The idea that this may be something that happened in your life and therefore you've gone on to develop that taste. It may very well be so, but it's not always the case. I think that's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yes, I am. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I remember I was chatting with some women who aren't kinky and who didn't know I'm kinky about these books. And I'd only read the first book, and that part of the character where it's sort of the origin story of Christian Grey is introduced towards the end. I hadn't read that yet. And these women who were vanilla, that is, they weren't kinky, some of them found that very reassuring. It's okay. It's explained. It's okay. Just read to the last book, and so I'm really interested in the way that was found to be somehow reassuring to people.
Yes.
Not necessarily to kinky people.
Yes.
Oh, something did go wrong with him, the poor man. But there you go. That's why he's kinky. And yeah, I am very much inclined to challenge that with clients who won't go down that route. I challenge it very gently, of course.
Yes.
And when I'm in more of an activist space, I might be a bit more robust in challenging it.
Yes, because, I think I heard you say, your vanilla friend said, oh, this is what went wrong, as if there was something that was intrinsically altered the trajectory of someone's sexual interests, as opposed to it being a more organic kind of development. And yes, that's just a taste, a sexual preference that someone's developed. I guess you could use the analogy of music here, couldn't you? And say that some people like opera and some people like, rock and roll. And is that because you played rock and roll at your house? Well, maybe not. Maybe it was just something that was stumbled upon or naturally developed.
Yes. You'll know perhaps the British artist who's quite popular in the media, Grayson Perry.
Yes.
He's got a quote in one of his books, which I'll paraphrase because I can't get exactly right, but he was saying that his wife, who is a psychotherapist, takes the view that we all have fetishes, but some people's fetishes are mainstream, like young, slim, large-breasted women, or your handsome men who've got a body like a washboard.
Yes.
These too are fetishes, that because they're mainstream, they're not viewed as such.
Yes, it's interesting, and one of the things that I've come to become aware of over the years is that to use your term, the large-breasted, thin-waist women and the washboard chested males, they're considered quite healthy fetishes, whereas the other fetishes are considered not as healthy. And I think that that's a misnomer as well, isn't it? Because as long as people are, working within the law and, they're just doing what makes them happy, there should be no stigma here, should there?
No, and I think it is improving. I think really the internet has been a game changer for kinky people, because it's through websites like FetLife and earlier websites like that, people have been able to find each other. And partly that's about, finding BDSM or kink partners to have kinky sex with. It's also about making friends and communicating and learning. These are just people, they're your greengrocer, they're your teacher, they're your mate, to keep quiet about it, have particular preferences, and they're just normal people who want to do what they want to do.
Yes, I mean, many years ago, myself and my wife, we were in town in Manchester and went for something to eat, and we're kind of sitting having our food and having a drink, and it was only because I'd done some CPD on fetishes and kink that I realised that there was actually what's called in the bondage community a munch going on, where people are meeting up to discuss their interests, and you wouldn't have known had you not have listened carefully. I was walking past the table and I picked up a couple of phrases and I thought, I know what's going on here, but you wouldn't have known at all. This wasn't people who were dressed in rubber outfits or running around with whips or knee-high boots. They were like the person I see at my local corner shop.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, my experience of the kink community is that there's a lot of very, very positive, self-organising people who organise things like munchers, which are often ways for people who want to get involved, aren't quite sure about it, just come to a pub or a restaurant in the day, and stick with normally dressed people and have a chat. Then there's a lot of clubs that people can go to where they've got equipment, and people would dress up if they want to, and these places are almost always they run by people who have an important investment in being safe.
Yes.
So they will have sort of monitors, in the club.
Yes.
To keep an eye on things, make sure everything's being done safe and consensually.
Yes. Yes, almost like a referee, I believe. They come to observe the scene, what's going on, and will step in if they think there's something that could be detrimental, or a person is in distress and the other person isn't responding to that. I think it's really fascinating. I mean, my final question is that if you're a therapist, if there's a therapist listening to this and thinking, I'd like to engage a little bit more in CPD, or I'd like to offer my services as a kink-aware therapist, what do you think their next step should be?
Well, I think some CPD is a good idea. I offer workshops every so often, and there are also sometimes workshops offered by Pink Therapy, that organisation you've already mentioned. It's a lot of reading people can do as well. I would suggest that the Pink Therapy directory is quite a good place to advertise, because you can put that you yourself are kinky on there, and I think some clients will just always prefer, if they're kinky, have a kinky counsellor. So I think those would be good first steps, and the CPD continues. I'll be talking at the Person-Centred Association's LGBTQ conference on the 25th of November, and I'll be speaking about the origin story and some of that material we've already discussed. So if anyone wants to go to that, they can hear me talk. Okay, and just for those listeners who might be listening in the future, because the podcast tends to hang around a long time, that's the November of
2023. So if you're listening in 2024, 2025, you might want to check Bay's website for events that she's speaking at. I mean, I guess we talked about therapists declaring that they're kinky themselves. I mean, you can be kink aware and offer a service without being kinky, can't you?
Absolutely, yes. And I mean, I really do think it's we want our therapists to be LGBTQ aware, don't we? Yes. So I really feel like one can see kink as coming under the queer umbrella, I suppose.
Yeah, the panoply, yes.
So I think as a minimum, we should really be expecting our new counsellors and therapists to have a little bit of training, in their basic training, as we do with regard to LGBTQ, and the alphabet soup there.
Yes, absolutely. And Bay, it's been an absolute joy talking to you. We will be sharing some links. And if you're listening to this, if you go to the Counselling Tutor website, go to the podcast tab. It's episode 273, and the links that Bay and I have discussed will be popped in there, and you can have a look and do some CPD and make your own mind up and take your own journey. So it just leaves me to say, Bay Whitaker, thank you so much for joining us.
Massive thank you to Bay Whitaker. Thank you to you, Rory, as always, for reaching out, holding these interesting chats that you can bring it to us for our CPD. We're grateful you joined us today. This is episode 273 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast.
Yes, we started off with student services, planning your research project. Every student needs to do a bit of research, and we hope we've helped you along the way with some observations and some direction when you come to plan your research. We moved on to ethical, sustainable practice, and we talked about building a support network so that you don't feel isolated and that you build a network of professional, critical friends to support you and just to catch up and have a cup of tea with. And then in Practice Matters, we met up with Bay Whitaker, who talked about kink in the therapy room. And finally, if you enjoyed this podcast, why not give us a 5-star review on iTunes? If you listen on iTunes or your platform, if it allows you to give a review, give us a review. We'd love that. We'd love your feedback. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.